Hi everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nick Wilton. I'm the Dean of the Business School at Oxford Brookes University. And it's my absolute pleasure both to have Fran as an entrepreneur in residence at the Business School for the past few years, but also to welcome her to give this talk today on a very interesting topic, which I think will be, for those in the room, but also for those that will follow up subsequently, watch the recording, of particular interest on the topic of the multi-billion-pound opportunity most small businesses don't know they can access, which is quite an enticing title of a presentation. So, Fran, I could introduce you, but you will do a much better job of it yourself. So I will pass over to you and then come back at the end for any questions that we have.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you for the warm welcome. Really lovely to be here today, and hopefully going to share some really helpful stuff to help other people. For those of you that don't know me, I'm one of the entrepreneur in residence at Oxford Brookes University. I will tell you a little bit more as we go through about my background. But I think we're all here for this big question. Hopefully, screen sharing is working. Yes, this big question. Like many people that are joining here, I am technically classified as a small business, and was oblivious, or maybe not oblivious, but I knew that there were some more opportunities in the public sector previously and I had never accessed them. And what I want to do today is share with you a little bit about my kind of honest journey of how we got that, but also some real kind of key tips and takeaways so that anybody out there that's running any sort of small business has the opportunity to go out there and win some of these contracts, because this is a pretty big opportunity. In fact, if the slides, hopefully my screen is sharing now, or we've gone too far, forgive me. Let's go back a bit because oh, it's not like I'm not having a great day with technology today, but we'll get there. Here we go. Hopefully we're going to stay on this slide now. So this is a pretty big opportunity. In the UK alone, 300 billion a year is spent by public sector on suppliers every single year. So if you are accessing some of that, brilliant. But if you're not accessing it, this is a massive opportunity that you're missing out on, because actually only a third of that 300 billion is set to go to small businesses. So us small businesses have an opportunity to access £100 billion worth of income for our businesses, and yet majority are not doing it. And I would put myself a few years ago in that category as one of the organisations that wasn't doing it. I was running a lovely business, a great, dare I say, little business. It was me, a VA, an idea, and a laptop. We had a few corporate sector clients, and we were doing okay, right? It was a nice, comfortable business that was doing okay. But what fundamentally changed for us was when we discovered how to access these public sector contracts. And in the first year that we accessed those contracts, we 10x'd our revenue. So this isn't just a small growth, we 10 times the size of the business. And we've moved to the position now where we are a multi-million-pound organisation that employs a large team of people, has real impact in our sector, and are also seen as sector leaders. And all of that stemmed from us learning and understanding how to bid for this public sector work. Where we were talking about the government has this multi-million-pound, 300 billion pound pot of money. 100 billion of that is supposed to go to small businesses. And in 2025, only 45.2 billion went to small businesses. So this isn't even though that money is there, we're still not accessing it. So I'm super passionate about trying to help small businesses access that money, because it is there for the taking. And there's a really good reason for us to do this, because actually small businesses, we are in a brilliant place, which I'm going to share with you in a minute about why the government actually needs us to be accessing this. But you might be sitting there thinking, well, it's all great. That sounds like big numbers. It's fantastic, but maybe that's not for me. Maybe this is only for big companies, or you need to know someone. And there are all of these myths that I hear constantly from small businesses around this. So, for example, a lot of the time, small businesses will think, the myths are actually some of the things that are really great. We've already said that whilst it's only for big companies, we're hearing that actually the government and procurement companies want smaller businesses to be bidding on this. So it's not just for the big companies, it is for the smaller companies too. often people feel they need to know someone. And this is one of the things that I find the coolest about this is actually you don't need to know anyone. You don't need any pat on the back. The beauty of public sector procurement is the fact that it is a level playing field, that every single opportunity above £25,000 that is offered out to the public or that any kind of public sector organisation wants to procure, they have to go through a competitive and fair process. So it doesn't matter who you know, it doesn't matter what your background is. If you can meet the criteria that they're looking for, you can have just as much chance as any other organisation. So you don't need to know anyone. I think that's a really, really great thing about it. A lot of the time, small businesses have said to me, but the paperwork is overwhelming. And I'll agree with you. Yes, it is. It can seem overwhelming. And it can be full of jargon, ITTs, DPSs, frameworks, all of these kind of jargon that people sort of get a bit overwhelmed with that puts them off. Actually, once you know what that stuff is, and you've got a roadmap that links you through that, it's actually not that complicated. And hopefully today I'll give you some of that roadmap to help. A lot of organisations worry that they don't have a track record, and to an extent that can be a problem, because one of the things that we'll talk about in this session today is about actually what is the track record that you do need to win these, and how can you navigate that. So it can be a blocker, but there are ways to navigate that, and I'll share with you today some of those things. And often people just don't know where to find them. So I'm going to show that to you as well, because it's actually really simple to find these. It's free and simple to find where these contracts are. So let's start and talk about actually why, as a small business, you really should be doing this, because the fact that you're small is a massive advantage. Actually, a lot of the public sector procurement are looking for small businesses for the reason, the fact that as small organisations, we're generally very innovative and we can pivot and be agile and move fast, which is something that a lot of our bigger competitors can't do. There's a huge amount of pressure on the public sector to think differently and do things differently. And that's where small businesses really can come in and show that they can innovate and be agile and do things in a different way, which stands us in a really great position and a great advantage. But also, we're generally very, very connected to our communities. The fact that we're small, we're generally within our communities and connected. And again, a lot of pressure on public sector to procure locally, to work with local organisations. So again, it's really, really advantageous the fact that we are small and generally we're connected with our communities. So before we get into some of the nitty gritty, I want to give you a case study. I've already alluded to the fact that we've done this ourselves and we've won millions of pounds worth of contracts, but we've also been helping other organisations do that. And organisations that maybe are a bit like you or maybe wouldn't typically consider doing this. So I'll give you an example. We've been working with a small creative agency from the Isle of Wight. So quite small, local, not necessarily seen as an organisation that would naturally go for public procurement. They're founded and run by quite a young founder, and they had no public sector experience. They came to us and said, we really want to do this, we want to grow it. And on our first contract that we supported them with, they actually won a £90,000 contract with the Office of National Statistics. It's a little picture of us all working together with some of the ONS staff. Now, the nice thing about this is that not only has that given them their footprint and their foot in the door with public sector, it's given them an incredible amount of credibility. So when they go for others now, they're like, we've worked with the Office of National Statistics. They're a pretty big brand. Most people have heard of them. And it gives them an amazing, amazing foothold to start doing this. So this is possible for every kind of organisation that is out there, as long as you're willing to kind of follow a few key steps. So let's get into the nitty gritty and find out how we actually do this. Well, the first thing we need to do is actually find the contracts. That's super important. So where are these contracts? And I mentioned before that one of the beauties of this is they're all available, and it's made very, very simple. Every contract above £25,000 has to be publicly advertised. Some of them below 25,000 are publicly advertised, but above they have to be publicly advertised. And they're advertised in 3 spaces. 2 of them are really key websites. In fact, 2 of them cover the third one as well. So Contracts Finder, which you can go to contracts.find-tender.service.gov.uk, or Find a Tender Service, which is findatender.service.gov.uk. You can go to these websites right now and you can search them for all open opportunities. Now, you could sit there and scroll through them. I promise you it will take you a long time. One of the things I find fascinating is the complete vast range of things that are procured through these public services. Everything from I mean, I get some alerts on this. I see things randomly come up, such as body removal. I mean, I hadn't really thought that through, but evidently that is a service that a local department needs to procure, through to creative services, to website development, through, I mean, almost everything. I can get catering, construction, you name it. There is a public sector organisation that is procuring that out there. So whatever your business does, it is procuring it out there. And all you need to do is go onto these websites and search for what it is that you do and see who is procuring that at this time. It's something that you have to get into the habit of doing quite regularly. So we've even gone as far as now we've actually set up our own systems that automatically alert us to this. You can actually you can buy systems that alert you to these things, but personally, I think it's better to have your own personalized ones that you create, so it's really spot on for you. And over time, you learn how to search. What are the best search terms? What are the best things for you to search for? Sometimes it's directly related to your service, and other times it's more broad. So it might be more related to the people that you support or the area that you support. So, for example, if you support small businesses, as an example, as a coach, you might search coaching, but you might also search small businesses, and that might bring up something that's maybe slightly different, but would be suitable for what you do. So very, very simple to actually find these things. It's just a process of sitting down, putting some time in the diary to go through and find those things. You'll notice I put on there frameworks and DPSs. There's a couple of ways that these are procured. Sometimes there are things that are literally, this is a contract, this is the value, and this is how you bid for it. Other times you have things which are called frameworks, or DPSs, which stands for Dynamic Purchasing Systems. I hope I've got that right. I'm not perfect on all the acronyms these days, but effectively what they mean is they are effectively, you apply to them and you go on a framework. So an organization will say, we have 20 million to spend over the next 5 years on a range of different services that meet these needs. And you apply to go onto a framework so that when that authority is ready to buy that service, they will have a list of pre-approved suppliers that they can come to. So it's a sort of first step to kind of get on a sort of a pre-approved purchasing list, which means you're much more likely to get the work as it comes through later. And it's a quicker process when you go through on a framework or a DPS system later. So all of these procurement opportunities are there. And unlike those of you that maybe are working in more traditional procurement spaces, such as going to corporates, you probably find you have to do a lot of marketing. You have to do a lot of going out there and reaching out to people. You have to keep relationships warm. You have to find out what their needs are and meet them. The beauty of this is that all of that is presented to you up front. Somebody has a budget, it has been allocated, it is going to be spent. They have a specification of exactly what they want, and they are ready to buy it, and they have a time frame. So whilst a lot of people will look at bidding for this stuff as quite time consuming, because actually when you find a tender and you go through the bid process, it can be time consuming. On the flip side, you're not spending ages doing cold marketing and sort of building networks in another way. So there's swings and roundabouts to it, but if you get into it and you're into that process again, it's a really effective way to find those contracts and find that work for your business. Once you find them, the next thing you need to do is actually assess whether you are appropriate. And one thing that we encourage everybody to do is to be what we like to call bid ready, to have a list of everything that you need before you go into those bids. Because when you start bidding, most people will focus on the actual bid writing, which we'll come to in a minute. Even before that, you have a lot of boxes that you need to tick. So, for example, you need to have the right policies in places, the right insurances. You need to have financial accounts ready, because all of the public sector procurement processes are very risk adverse. So they do a lot of background checking, probably more so than you'll experience in the private sector. You'll need examples of relevant experience, at least 3 examples of relevant experience. And I'm going to come to that in a moment, because cracking that is also really important. You'll need data, and again, super important, I'll come to that. And often you need CVs and qualifications of yourself and your team. And please don't be put off if you are a solopreneur and it's just you. When I started this, as I said, it was just me and a VA. So just my CV was enough to get me across that first hurdle. But obviously, as you grow and you grow a team, then you also need their CVs and qualifications. And there's a really good reason to get a lot of this done up front. And the reason for doing that is that when you start looking at these contracts, you need to look at some of the upfront information, because a lot of the time they'll have criteria such as minimum turnover criteria around the types of insurance that you need to have or will commit to having in place by the time that the contract is live, and so on. And very often small businesses will go into this and they will spend all of their time writing a fantastic bid. And then, a few hours before the deadline, firstly, they suddenly realise they need all these documents to upload, and it can take a bit of time to upload them and get them all in the right place. But secondly, they'll realise they don't have them, and they've spent all of this time writing a bid, and they actually won't be qualified to apply for it because they haven't met one of those criteria. So that work up front will save you a huge amount of time later on, and avoid a lot of the pitfalls. So really think about what are the things that you need to be bid ready. And then once you're bid ready, the next thing is to start going and looking at them. But there is a little bit of a catch-22 here, because as I mentioned, all of the contracts will ask you for 3 examples of relevant experience. So in a way, to win a contract, you need experience, but to get experience, you need to win a contract. It's a little bit of a catch-22. There are some ways around it, and I'm going to give you 3 examples of how we have and other organisations get around this. So the first way, I think it's going to bring them all up. The first way is to actually start small. Start with those small contracts. Often, if you're looking at something that's very, very small with an organisation, the commissioners are a little bit more willing to not necessarily take a risk, but to invest in something that's more seen as a pilot, and so doesn't necessarily need the robustness of we have already delivered for this client at this value, and so on. And to give you an example, when they ask for the experience, they don't only just ask what it is, they ask how much the value of that contract was, who commissioned it, what the duration of. So they ask quite a lot of detail about each of those 3 sets of experience. So if you start off with smaller contracts, there's a chance that you can use previous experience, which leads on to looking at adjacent experience and framing experience that you might have had in the private sector with charities, that will be able to show that you have got relevant experience, both in terms of what you've delivered. They're also very interested in the contract value. So again, if you're bidding for something, a contract that's worth 5 million, but the largest contract you can show them is 50,000, it's probably not going to get you very far. So again, you need to be able to frame it in terms of adjacent value and maybe some experience. If you haven't got that public sector, you've only got private. But the third route, which is often the fastest route, and it's one that we were very lucky that we started small. There is an element of luck, I think, when you start, if you just go on your own. So we won our first one on our own. But the way that we've been able to leverage up the contracts is the third route, which is all around partnerships. So we built a lot of partnership with established organisations and organisations that had slightly bigger contracts with us, so that every time we've moved up the scale. And we're now at the scale where we're partnering with organisations that are looking at contracts that were in the sort of 5 to 10 million bracket. We couldn't have done that on our own, but once we get through the first one, we've just got the first multi-million-pound one on its own. Now we're in that we've got that capability to say we've done that level of contract. So partnering is a really fantastic way to start scaling up. But also on your very first ones, just as I explained with the creative agency, that first one again was a really great way for them to be able to scale up and show that they could do something bigger. This gives you another case study actually of where we helped another organisation do this. The reason I put LinkedIn in the middle of there is because they started with a LinkedIn post. Sometimes I see really cool procurement opportunities and I kind of think it's not for us, but I'd love to share it with others. And so I posted on LinkedIn about an opportunity with the Health Lottery Foundation. Notoriously known, was more of a sort of charities tender bid, but they're notoriously known for being highly, highly competitive. And on the back of that, the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation reached out to us, a small charity that work in the food allergy space, and they wanted to do something but couldn't do it on their own. And so we ended up partnering with them, and they ended up winning that funding, and we've now helped co-deliver that with them. So they've won majority of the funding, and we co-delivered part of it. But they were able to piggyback our expertise, our experience. They were able to piggyback our contract values and all of those other things that enabled them to win the contract, with us just delivering a small part of it to support them, and help the commissioners understand that we were managing that risk. So partnering is a really, really great way to kind of grow and scale this. So once you've kind of found the right contracts, you're bid ready. The next bit, and the bit that most people really love to know about and focus on is writing a winning bid. And you can do all sorts of things around this. You can hire bid writers. It's something that we've looked at, but never actually chosen to do because I actually want it really to come from us. And or you can just kind of go at your own, or you can get support and services from organisations like us. We're helping lots of others now write their bids and work out what works. But I want to share with you a few really key things that we found really works on this. So firstly, I know it sounds really silly, but answer the questions that are being asked. It's like if you've ever done any grant applications or anything like that, what the commissioners genuinely want to give you scores, but you have to give them the answers that they want. And in most tender documents, they'll actually even tell you how they score it. Typically, they're on a scale of 1 to 5, and it'll give you the criteria. So we skip to 5 and we go, if I was marking this, would it meet stage 5 or criteria 5 points from it? So really look at what is the question that they're asking you and actually ask it and answer that question, but answer it in a way. Actually, we'll come to this in the third point, but focus on outcomes, not activities. So a lot of the time, this was something that actually I learned from one of my mentors, and it's a question I still answer all the time. When you're writing a bid and you write anything, ask your question, so what? So for example, we might say in our organisation, we've mentored 100 young people in the last 3 months. So what? Like that's lovely for a commission. But what does that mean? So actually, we're going to say we've mentored 100 young people, and these have been the outcomes. They've reduced more of their employment, blah, blah, blah. So thinking about what are the actual outcomes that you're delivering rather than just this is what we do or this is what we've done and so on. So really, really think about those outcomes. We're going to talk about data in a minute because that's super important in doing that as well. And write it for the person who didn't commission the service. So often you will have a commissioner that writes the brief, but sometimes you'll have some of the people that are marking this, because they usually will sit in a room and will mark all of them at the same time. It's very process driven. It's not on. Again, those of you that have been in the private sector space, sometimes you'll win a contract because they like the person, because you connect with them and they like you and they think, yes, I'll buy from you. And we often talk about that in kind of private sector. It's about the relationships. On this, it's much more scientific. It's much more, do you meet the criteria or don't you? But you've got to understand that some of the people that are assessing that don't necessarily know all the details of the contract. So you need to be able to explain things really clearly. And in a way that's interesting, because I always think if I was a commissioner and I was assessing these and I was having to sit down and read 20 bids, what is it that's going to make mine interesting to read and exciting and enjoyable? Because it is a human that is sitting and reading this, and it needs to be engaging in that way. So laying it out in a way that's really clear for people to read, using bullet points, formatting is a really big part of this as well, but making it easy to read and easy to understand. And that really, really makes a massive, massive difference. The next thing then to consider is data. And I said I would mention this. Data is super important. It's all great saying, we've done this and we've done great things, but how do you prove it? And this is where getting a really great blend between data and case studies is really important. So we have done this for these people. We had to meet these criteria. These were the outcome. So using that and using, again, having some data to back things up. Over the years, we've got really great at understanding what is the data that our commissioners want, so that we can give them that data and make sure that, again, it's make it really easy for them to tick the box to go, if I'm assessing this and I'm risk adverse, which I will be, because as a commissioner, my job is not to maybe it's worth me mentioning here a mindset. I think as entrepreneurs and business owners, we think in opportunity and a little amount, mostly about 80% opportunity, maybe 20% risk. If you're a public sector procurement commissioner, you are thinking majority risk, small percent opportunity. You're here to manage that risk. So when I give you data and case studies, for the commissioner, I'm going, this is somebody that's not just giving me theory. They've got hard data that proves the facts that they're saying. that in terms of a risk category for me is much better. They've done this before, they can evidence it really well, and they've got that data. Of course, there's always to gather that data, which unfortunately I don't think we'll have time to discuss today, but maybe on another call we can talk about actually where that data comes from, how you do that, and how you deliver that really effectively. So super important to have those real life stories and the case studies that bring it to life, and the data that backs that up to really evidence that you've done this before and you can do this again, and tick that kind of slight niggly nag that commissioner might have. Does this person know about this well enough? And really then, I guess my other kind of tip on this is around, again, not just, I mentioned this before, but building these ecosystems. A lot of what we're seeing, especially at the moment in public sector procurement, there has been a bit of a shift, that a lot of commissioners are now not just saying, well, this is one small contract to deliver this one piece of work. They're looking at it joined up things and saying, actually, we want all of this work to be delivered in a cohesive way. And therefore, one supplier, it's highly unlikely that one supplier is going to be able to deliver that on their own. So actually what we want is to have organisations that build alliances and grow together and bid, and more often we're now bidding in consortiums with lead bids and subcontractors. And we're seeing more and more that public sector are doing what they call pre-market engagement events, or events when a whole range of organisations can come together and hear about the procurement exercise, but the clever ones of us are then actually connecting up with all the other organisations and starting to build these alliances. So building those alliances is super, super important to make sure that actually, again, you're in the right place and with the right partners, and doing a lot of due diligence on your partners to make sure that when you go into these things, you're going in not just by yourself, but with other organisations. We've got a little bit of an ambition now at Goal 17, because we've been doing this for long enough. We really want to bring together some of those SMEs for co-bids. I want to see that 45 billion go up to that 100 billion that's available. But my belief is we can only do that through really good partnerships and alliances. We've got the innovation, we've got the ability to do things that are bigger, the much bigger companies can't do. But we need to come together to do that. So I think there's a really interesting space here to start building those alliances, and it's something that we're quite proactively doing. So all being well, you put in a good bid, it goes through, and then you get these lovely letters that say, congratulations, you've been awarded the contract. They're lovely letters to get. Often, if I'm honest, as a small business owner, when they come through, there's also that, oh my God, now we've got to go and deliver this. There's a sort of bit of a sort of imposter syndrome reality moment of, okay, this is great, winning it. And I want to touch on the fact that winning really is just the starting gun. It is definitely not the finishing line. And it's so important that you don't look at this as, let's just go win a contract. You must think about what happens once you win it. How are you going to deliver that? Now, process of bidding for it will help you do it. And sometimes even those early bids are part of you practicing or working out how you would deliver these things. But the delivery is the absolute most important thing. And there are some key things that we have learned the hard way sometimes and the good way in other times. But key things are, scope creep is real. Anyone that's been in this space, whenever you talk about this, will giggle. But one of the jobs that you do most importantly when you win a contract is making sure that you're super clear on what you're delivering and what you're not delivering. And making it really available for the commissioner that if they want to creep the scope, that's absolutely fine, but they need to do a contract extension. You don't just do it. And I think, again, I've seen this happen a lot of times with small businesses when they win these public sector procurement contracts. They win the contract, they're so excited and so keen to please the commissioner, especially because these commissioners have these big names. I remember one of our earlier contracts, we won a big contract with the Mayor of London. And I was like, oh my God, it's the Mayor of London. I was so kind of excited about it. And then when they asked me for something, my inclination was to say, yes, of course we can do that. But I learned very quickly to say, yes, of course we can do that, but it would be a contract extension. It's not part of what was part of the original contract. So being really clear on managing your scope creep is really, really important. Also, building great relationships with your commissioners is really important. One of the things that I've learned often is that some of the reasons that this work is commissioned is because actually the commissioners don't have all the answers to the questions. So they've written fantastic specification and brief, but often they don't know the answers to all the questions, which is kind of why they're getting you in as well. And so by building a really great relationship with your commissioner, you can then understand actually what is it that is going to fall within scope, and where do we actually need to adjust the scope? But also, how can we work on this together? How can we flex and move things so that we make sure that we get the outcomes that we want? Ultimately, they want outcomes. Sometimes what they've commissioned won't actually get them the outcomes that they want. So again, it's a way of helping and working with them and building those great relationships so that you can do that. Sometimes that comes from being quite firm with them at the beginning and setting the boundaries, but over time, creating those really good relationships is really important. And in this space, that is even more important because commissioners talk to each other and they recommend suppliers to each other. And where we've got to, which is a really great place, is now we find that one commissioner will find in, for example, one local authority, will have another local authority phone us up and say, we're thinking of building a tender, a new procurement exercise, a new tender. Can we talk to you first? Because we would like to understand how you would write it, so we can write it to make sure that it's going to meet the market needs. And also, if we do write it, would you please bid on it? And they'll actually ask us to and tell us about it. So you almost get into the position where you're helping create the opportunities that you'll then later on bid for. And that's, again, that falls into kind of the pre-market engagement event. But again, it's really great to build those relationships so that when those opportunities do come up, you can have influence. And that's not influence because you want to make sure that you win and no one else has a chance. It's influence to make sure what's being commissioned is actually using your experience, what is most needed in the service that's going to be delivered. Because as I say, commissioners don't always know all the answers. And that's why they come to organisations like ours to kind of find those answers, and organisations like yours, because you'll have new innovative solutions, especially where innovation is involved. A lot of the time they won't know some of the innovations that are available to them. So again, you can help sort of present those to them and support them in that. And then a really important thing about this is when you do contracts well, what happens is that they lead to more contracts. So, for example, I mentioned the Mayor of London as a contract. Us doing that commission well meant that not only did we get the 2.5 years of the original contract, but it now has been recommissioned again. And not only recommissioned again, but in their recommissioning, they've actually extended what they've asked us to do and helped us to asked us to help support some other small businesses that have come into the contract as it's expanded. So once you build those strong relationships and you do it really, really well, and also that's where the data comes in. We love to continually evidence to our commissioners how well we're doing so that they know. Obviously, with all of these contracts, there's a lot of reporting. And again, there's all sorts of ways that reporting can be managed, but making sure that you're doing really good reporting to them at all the reporting periods means that actually once you've done it, they then think, okay, yes, great. We would like to extend this. So that extension is really important. But it also, again, leads to more opportunities. It again leads to them saying, look, we've got another contract coming up. Could we do this as an extension of your existing contract? Or could we maybe get you involved in that pre-market engagement so that when we launch it, we've got everything in the right place? So managing those relationships as you go through is so important. And that, to be fair, is not only a whole nother talk, it's a whole training course to share how you manage those relationships. There's loads of nuances, but please keep that in your mind that when you go into this, that management of those courses is really, really important. Don't let your first contract be your last. It's a bit harsh, but I think you get the gist on that. And to give you an example of again where we've done this, which has been super incredible. We actually helped 5 local authorities bid for some Department for Education funding. So again, don't think that just because there's procurement out there that it's just for you as a small business. Sometimes we find opportunities that are not for us, they're for other partners, but we bid for them or on behalf of them. So for these 5 local authorities, the Department for Education put up a huge amount of money that they could access. Local authorities all across the country. It was £30 million was the original contract value to be dispersed all across the country. We actually wrote the bid for 5 local authorities. They submitted it, and all 5 of them won that funding. But the interesting thing about that was not only did they win it, we helped them keep it. So we're now into our 4th year. It's generated over £3 million worth of revenue between us and those local authorities partners. And we have 100% renewal rate on those contracts. So for 4 years, every year they've been renewed. And interestingly enough, the last renewal, only a few have been renewed. I think there's only about 7 and we're 5 of them, as far as I'm aware. So again, but that was because we did the data piece, we did the reporting, we brought others on that journey, we worked with the commissioners, we worked really closely with the local authorities, we brought everybody together in a partnership. So again, making sure that you really manage those contracts pays dividends. For us, these at the time were our biggest contracts, but the legacy of those have become a springboard for even more. So really now, I was kind of going to open it to questions, and I know Nick, I think you're going to kind of host some questions. I'm more than happy to answer some questions. I have got one kind of final kind of summary slide, but I thought it might be nice to kind of pause for breath there, and see if there are any questions that anybody's got specifically that they would like to ask, and then I'll come and wrap up at the end if that's okay, Nick.
Perfect. Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you, Fran. Yes. So, any questions for Fran on what she said? I mean, that I'm sure that's incredibly useful to the people in the room, and I think probably more widely as well. So thank you very much for that. But yeah, if you have any questions for Fran, please either put them in the Q&A, or Crystal can allow you to ask the question in person.
Yeah, that was a lot of information, but hopefully it's left people motivated to go do this.
I'm absolutely certain. I think it's, as I said at the beginning, I think it's a hugely sort of enticing kind of proposition that there is this money that's sat there that is, you know, available ultimately to the right firms, and ultimately is there to be bid for. I mean, if I can ask a question, I think, I mean, you talked, you know, really useful insights into your experience and the way that you've done this from scratch, ultimately, in terms of building alliances and so on. And one of the things you mentioned a couple of times is about language and about I mean, I know that writing, you know, research bids and so on, there's all sorts of parallels between kind of writing research bids and so on. But I think that's really interesting, because I know that the language on public sector contracts can be incredibly dense sometimes, but actually translating that and then writing it in a way which actually makes sense to you as an organisation, but also to the commissioners that might not have been the people that already constructed the bid, is I think really useful information. I don't know if you can say a little bit more about that.
So the first thing I would say is don't get intimidated by it. I think anybody that's downloaded any procurement documents, firstly, there's usually 10 documents full of so much information, and the language in it can be really intimidating. And I think, again, a lot of small business owners see that and go, oh, this is obviously not for me, because it is so confusing. One thing I will say is, when I started this, we didn't have the wonderful tools of AI. Use AI to help translate that, to help you understand, what is it actually asking me here? What is it actually asking me to deliver? And a lot of the time, there is a lot of language in there that is quite complex. I'm dyslexic, but I'm generally okay on most things. But when it comes to procurement documents, I sit there and I go, oh my gosh. But use a bit of AI, print things out. And it sounds really silly, but print it out. For me, that was made a massive difference. Me trying to always be eco and save paper. When it comes to these things, if I'm serious about it, it's worth printing out and going through the highlighter and go, right, it's asking, as part of this contract, it's asking you to do this. What does it actually mean by that? And then translating it. So I think there's this element of understanding what it's asking. But then when it comes to feeding it back, there's sometimes perhaps an inclination to respond in this kind of very advanced language, but that makes it really hard to read. And fundamentally, it's somebody that's got to sit there and read it. So don't be afraid to actually speak in very normal, easy to read English. Make it easy and simple to read. Sometimes to the point that it's almost, and again, it's good. I always think it's good to do the 14-year-old test. Give it to a 14-year-old. Can they understand it? Because if they can understand it, then you're probably hitting about the right level. Because actually, again, it's very easy when you know what you do very well to talk very fluidly about it, but in a way that maybe somebody that doesn't know what you do isn't so obvious. And keep asking yourself that question, so what? So that you can actually, again, keep making sure that the way you're answering is genuinely going to answer the question that's being asked. So don't be intimidated by that language, but also don't feel like you need to respond in that language. Respond in a way that is easy to read and comprehensible. And what I would say is be proud of who you are and what you do as a small business. Again, I made these assumptions that the reason this wasn't for me was because, it must be all these big grand businesses that were much more advanced and better than I was, until I realized that my strength was that I'm small, I'm innovative, and I'm agile. And as an organization, we've got so much to offer. So be proud of what you've got to offer. And really lay it out for the commissioners to see. This is who we are, and this is what we've got to offer.
Fantastic advice, and I think again, I think there's all sorts of parallels. I think with both bid writing, but also students. I think that first, answer the question that's been asked. I think is something I've said to students the entirety of my career. And so on. But I think that as you say, the 14-year-old test about that very direct, clear articulation. If you can say it in fewer words, I think sometimes that's often the best, rather than feeling you've got to, for want of a better phrase, gussy up your word, your language.
Yeah.
That's great. We've got a few questions and I think a hand as well. So here we go. So practical question from Ryan. Do they need to be SME limited company, or is there an opportunity for freelance individuals?
So in answer to your question, Ryan, yes, you can go in, and generally it'll come down to whether you meet the criteria. This is where I say kind of being bid ready. Do you meet the financial criteria? So again, if you are a freelance individual, you still have accounts. Even as a sole trader, can you evidence that those accounts meet the robustness that they're looking for? Do you have the right insurances in place? Those kind of things, that they're not going to disqualify you because you're not a limited company. And dare I say, not even if you're a charity or a CIC status, there's a huge push to get more social enterprises involved in these contracts as well. So you don't have to necessarily be a limited company. But what I would say is the challenge probably more in terms of being a freelancer and a sole trader is being able to really evidence that your accounts have got those robustness and the risk adverse parts that are really important. So there might be what I would say, Ryan, is sounds like it's a great opportunity again to join a partnership, find a business that maybe's got something that's doing similar or that can complement what you're doing, and then work together on it. Because again, often we've done some projects like the one that we explained with that creative agency. We're not a creative organisation. I haven't properly introduced what we do. We organise volunteer programmes and mentoring programmes. So it's quite niche what we do. But what we've done is, because we've got so good at managing these contracts, we partnered with that. In that case, we partnered with this creative agency, and we've gone in and said we will do the project management, the risk management, we'll do the safeguarding, we'll do the DE&I, we'll do all those bits, and they do the creative bits. So somebody, Ryan, I don't know what your business is, but somebody in with whatever it is that you do, maybe you partner with an organisation like ours, that we'll do the infrastructure for you, and you can deliver the bit that you're really good at. And that can be a great way to kind of navigate doing that, even at first. And then maybe through those contracts, you grow and you become a limited company and you have stuff, and then you can go alone a bit more. But that's a really great way to start.
Fantastic, thank you. A couple of questions from Martin Spiller. So when I presented the procurement bill as part of the opportunities for SMEs, many scoffed. How do we persuade small businesses that the time to tender is worth it and they do have a chance? I think some of what you've said really is kind of, goes some way. But is there anything else that might encourage SMEs to invest the time?
Martin, I think it's a really great question, because I sat there and scoffed myself. So I hear you, because and I think the reason is it's so intimidating. Like it feels, I think for many of us that run our businesses, it just feels like we're not welcome. And that's not for want of trying. I just think it's the process feels very unwelcoming. And I know there've been a lot of people that have done this in the past. What I would say is we're talking here, guys, about £100 billion, of which that just under 55 billion we're not accessing. So whatever you're doing in your business, if you imagine how much time you spend connecting with people on LinkedIn, how much time you spend going to networking events, how much time you spend, I don't know, doing Facebook marketing. To be fair, we're so into public sector procurement. We do still do some quite a bit of private work, but we haven't done a Facebook ad in years. But all of those things that you spend time on doing, just look at this as an alternative to that. And actually, it can be probably one of the most economically brilliant things that you can do for your business. So I think it's that belief and getting the belief that you can do this. But I think the other key belief is just don't feel like you've got to do it on your own. Reach out, please, anybody here, reach out to us. We will happily give you guidance and advice. And in some cases, if it's appropriate, even partner up and do it. But don't feel like you need to do it by yourself. Um, I think it is such a big opportunity, and it just has to be done. But maybe it's also just having more opportunities to hear from people like myself that have gone from being that small organization to actually doing it and going, yes, I found it confusing at the beginning, but once you navigate your way through it, it suddenly becomes super easy. And it is his understand the effort you put into your first one is the most effort you'll ever put into winning your first one. Once you've got your first one, you suddenly then the next one comes and the next one comes, and it's sort of then an exponential growth. It's that first one you've got to put the effort in. Think of it as like starting the bit when you started your business. How much effort did you have to put in at the beginning? It's the same with this. It's almost like starting another little business, because you are starting with a whole new sector, but going with that mindset, and it's absolutely possible.
Fantastic, and I think you've started to answer my second question, which I think you can.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah,
see.
okay, I've
Yeah,
got them up now. So how do
yeah.
you balance the opportunity cost versus of time versus the benefit to ensure it's profitable business, not just revenue enhancing? There's a couple of points in this as well. That it's maybe a slight tangent on this. One of the things that again we've got quite good at and would love to show others how to do is how to actually account for what it's going to cost you to deliver this contract, because there are contracts out there that are that many times we look at them and we go, you actually couldn't deliver this for the budget that's being offered. So, and there are organizations that will take those contracts as loss leaders to maybe open up other things, and that's fine. And that's a strategy that I know some organizations have used. We've never gone on any a tender that has been a loss leader. We have gone some that are quite close to the mark, but making sure that you know how to price what you do well and how much it's going to cost you to deliver things can be really powerful. But again, this is where I think it plays into our plans as small businesses, because as small businesses, generally we have slightly lower overheads. We have an ability to be more flexible and more innovative. And you can find ways to do things that you can put in the tender that is more cost effective for you, that is completely acceptable to the commissioners. It means that suddenly something that for a big organization, they couldn't be that agile, they couldn't do it that way. So you can therefore make it cost effective. So on actually delivering the contract, be really aware. Don't get kind of, I suppose, dazzled by the size of some of the value, which often is bigger than what people have been delivering through the private sector. Don't get completely dazzled by that and think, oh yeah, we could, if we win this, it'll be amazing. For that creative agency, £90,000 was probably the biggest contract they've ever won. And that would have been, it's very easy to get dazzled by that. But actually, let's break it down. What is it going to cost us to deliver each phase? Is there margin in it that makes it worthwhile? And if so, do we go or don't we go? So it's one of the analysis that we always do at the beginning is it worth it or isn't it? Before we even get into that bid writing, what is it going to cost us to deliver it? But yes, of course, there is a cost on our time to do this. Again, we've never employed bid writers. I do know other organisations that pay a lot of money for bid writers. That's when it can get really costly. What I would say is you don't need to do that. You know your business as well as anyone else. If you focus on those delivering the outcomes, giving the data, those other key things, if you get support, join groups of other SMEs that are doing this and share ideas about what's working, what's not working, you don't need to employ a bid writer. So really then it is that opportunity cost of your time. But in my head, the way I looked at it is I went, rather than spending that money on the networking and so on, it's just a different type of networking. It's a different type of business growth activity to what I've been doing. I still kept doing my networking, but I just did both side by side and allocated the time. Ultimately, if you stick with it, as soon as you get going again, that return on investment gets better and better.
Fantastic. And so one last question, which I potentially might be tricky to answer, given I imagined every bit is different. But is there a sense of how long it does take to put these bids together? I
Yeah.
guess over time, once you've got that body of evidence and the case studies, sort of things, it gets easier. But
Spot on, Nick. The more you do, the quicker and easier it gets. Again, we now have all sorts of big templates, and again, setting up the right systems around this. So to make this really effective, your first one, look at it as you're setting up your sales system rather than you're writing the bid. So when you're writing it with the mindset of I'm setting up a system that I can reuse, because that makes it really, really effective. I would say the first one that I did, I probably took not all in one block, but a week to write it in and around other things if I took all the time. So it did take quite a bit of time. And I we did well that we won our first one, but it wasn't the first one we looked at. I had gone through the process of reviewing quite a few others until I found the one that was right for us. And then after that, I think maybe we did one other before. I should check that so I know. But so you're looking at sort of a week to do a really good bid. But as you go forward, it gets quicker and quicker. And then also, as you start to form partnerships, you find that maybe you're not writing the whole bid, you're only writing a section of it, or you're contributing your content to somebody else that pulls it together and writes it as part of a partnership. But I would say that we did win a bid that we wrote in a day. I wouldn't recommend it. We did it because it wasn't on our radar. It came onto our radar and it was a day to go and we just wrote it in a day. So it can be done in a day. Wouldn't recommend it. I think again, there's the flight time, that hours you put into writing it, and the time that leads up to it. Over the years, we've got much better at giving ourselves a lot more runway to lead into it, rather than jumping in at the last minute and making sure then again we've got everything in a row and making sure that it's all organised.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Fran. I think we've gone through all the questions, so we'll draw things to a close. Almost 1 o'clock. So I'm sure that those in the listening will find that incredibly valuable. I'm not a small business owner. I'm not an entrepreneur, and I find it fascinating, and I wish I had a small business to go and start bidding with. But yeah, thank you again. Really, really fascinating stuff, and great to hear from the benefit of your experience on how to access this vast amount of unspent money. So, thank you again, and I'm sure everyone in the audience, if they have any questions, I'm sure they'll
Please,
we'll be able to reach out to you.
Yeah, just reach out to me. I'd love to hear from anyone that's interested. We are considering taking a small group of small business owners through sort of intense program at the moment to kind of help get them ready. So if anyone's interested in that, let me know. But do reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can see the kind of stuff that we're doing, or reach out to me on email. More than happy to answer questions and connect with people. But as a final message from me, please go for it. It will revolutionize your business. If you do it right and you do it well, it will revolutionize your business, and give you sustainability. Again, 5-year contracts. How wonderful is that for a business to know that you've got guaranteed income for 5 years, at a level that's probably above what you might be able to get in the private sector. So please do go for it and reach out to me and share with me how you get on, because I just love to hear how people get on.
Great. Very generous. Thank you very much, Fran, and thank you everyone for attending.